Are we in the twilight zone, Canada? Or are we starting to see a consistent shift in the way the mainstream media is covering Mark Carney? A few days ago, Mark Carney stood alongside BC Premier David Eby and announced what they called a landmark housing affordability plan. But buried in the announcement was a proposal to use government financing and taxpayer funding to convert thousands of unsold condos into affordable housing, while simultaneously reducing development charges to homeowners by up to 50%. As a result of all of the issues with this announcement, Carney is now getting slammed from all sides. Let's take a look.
So today, with the Premier, we're pleased to announce that Canada and British Columbia have reached a landmark new agreement to help build more homes, to bring down housing costs, and modernize infrastructure across the province. We'll do this by working together to reduce development charges. We will convert vacant condos into affordable housing, and we will invest in community infrastructure from schools and hospitals to public transit. Now, I mentioned development charges. They're one of the biggest barriers to new homes. These are the fees that are charged to developers that help fund the infrastructure needed to support new housing. That means water mains, roads, parks, community facilities. So through the Build Community Strong Fund, Canada will invest $1.6 billion in community infrastructure over the next decade. The BC government will match that investment. So that means $3.2 billion to finance the infrastructure communities need to support that housing, all while reducing municipal development charges that often get passed on to home buyers. Result, more people can afford homes and they get great infrastructure alongside it. Under this agreement, development charges on multi-unit housing projects across BC will be reduced by up to 50%, 50%, for the next 3 years. That means lower upfront costs, greater certainty for builders, more affordable homes for you to buy or rent. That could mean for a new unit, reducing costs by up to $40,000. Now, there's another thing we can do, and we're working together to do, which is to increase housing supply by making better use of units that already have been built. And to that end, we're announcing today that Canada and BC will have a new partnership on condo conversion. We're going to leverage innovative financing tools from Build Canada Homes to convert thousands of vacant condos into affordable homes. So by the fall, we'll work to offer these condos on the market. Finally, we will increase the housing supply across the province. As we do so with our various programs, we'll also build that essential new community infrastructure. That means new and improved transit systems, hospitals, community centers.
Okay, so on the surface, I would expect a lot of the left-leaning media to pick this up and say, hooray, Mark Carney's a genius. Despite the fact that all of the causes that he's been talking about are things that Pierre Poilievre and the Conservatives have been talking about over the last 4 years. Just saying. But now that Mark Carney is saying it, he's expecting everybody to, throw roses at him and other things at him. But there's some concerning aspects about this. Some people may have talked about this already, but I'm at the risk of repeating it. I'm going to go over what my concerns are. So number one, obviously what jumps out to everybody is, sounds like the government is going to be buying a bunch of condos. That's a problem because, well, the government shouldn't be buying condos, especially from developers that refuse to sell them because they don't want to make a quote-unquote loss. So this ends up being passed on to the taxpayer, which is us. And then the other aspect of this is this development charge piece. This really, really concerns me because they're saying they're going to be reducing development charges to the home buyer by up to 50%. But how are they doing this? Well, based on what he's announced, The development charges aren't actually going away at all. And they're not being reduced at all. We, as taxpayers across this country, we're the ones that are going to be paying them. So Mark Carney is going to be giving a whole bunch of money to the city of Vancouver, and each of these new development projects that is going to be started, either, high density housing, or perhaps it's going to be any of these single detached homes or multiplexes or whatever it is. All of them have development charges. Mark Carney hasn't said that the city of Vancouver has decided to permanently reduce the development charges. No. All he's saying is the development charges are going to be reduced by about 50%, and that's going to save the home buyer up to $40,000. But he doesn't say that it's going away. So what the read is, and this is what a lot of the experts are talking about, is that that's actually going to get passed on to the taxpayer, which is you and I, from St. John's, Newfoundland, all the way out to Yellowknife, people that will never buy a home in Vancouver in British Columbia, we're the ones that are going to be paying for these development charges. Meanwhile, it's the developer that gets to sit there, arms crossed, and say, yeah, well, thank you for all the money, because they're actually making it scot-free despite making poor business decisions. This is the big problem here. Now, the other aspect of this is the logical next question is, okay, so the government is going to be buying all these condos. What are the developer names? We don't know. Hasn't been disclosed. You'll find out in the fall. That's basically what the answer is. So you make this announcement now, but you'll find out the details once we get to them in 4 or 5 months. Well, if you already know that there's a bunch of units there, and if you've already earmarked the exact amount of money that you're going to be using for this, shouldn't you have figured that out already? But this is the issue. They obviously have figured this out already, and they haven't disclosed it. So this isn't going to be a case of, well, it's the developer that can barely get by and has no money. If that was the case, why aren't you disclosing this now? So this raised tons of red flags here. And never mind the fact that development charges are supposed to fund things like Mark Carney was talking about being built at the end. Development charges are supposed to fund infrastructure in the communities. Supposed to fund roads, plumbing, transit, community centers, all of this stuff. That's what they're there for. Now, communities across this country have been using development charges as kind of a slush fund. And I know because I've been talking to some people in our area about this, and all around the Golden Horseshoe, there's these municipalities that charge these exorbitant development charges, and they take that money and it sits in the bank. It's not supposed to be a slush fund. It's supposed to be money that developer is paying for you to put in the infrastructure for that development. This is not supposed to be some, big cash grab for municipalities. And we've heard from Scott Aitchison that Vancouver has increased their development charges for home builders by over 100%. And then the same guy, Gregor Robertson, was at this press conference. He has the nerve to be at this press conference where he was presiding as mayor over the city by increasing these development charges. It's an insult. Now, this is where it comes down to. So not only do you have these municipalities that are charging these exorbitant development charges, and on top of that, you have the federal government saying, oh, we're going to give you even more money.
Generally, higher property taxes will result in lower land values. So what you guys are doing is you're lowering taxation on property through DCC's elimination, and you're drawing this money from income tax revenue. And so have you considered that aspect?
What we've considered is that and we see this. I'll speak from a federal government perspective. We look across the country. There's certain provinces, BC and Ontario particularly, where development charges have reached a level where they were pricing out ordinary people, I can put it that way, the average home purchaser, and certainly in affordability. And there are advantages, there are synergies in some of the programs that we can have, both at the federal and provincial level, to help provide that infrastructure. Because after all, the development charges for the infrastructure gets capitalized up front, since we're talking about tax, gets capitalized up front, hits and gets passed on through to the buyer of the home, as opposed to what the federal government can do, the provincial government to do, particularly working together, which is to smooth that over time, build world-class infrastructure, community infrastructure, make the homes more affordable, get more people into those homes. And I'll just underscore one last thing, which is that by doing this for 3 years, it's the construction over that period of time where the savings will take place. Remember, we're providing infrastructure funding over 10 years, so the infrastructure gets built. And, it's a chance to prove this model at scale, more affordable housing, better communities, and we'll see as we move forward as governments about extending it.
Smooth over time. Ladies and gentlemen, smooth over time, essentially what that means is that we're going to be borrowing money, printing money on the deficit, and we will pay for that money as the Canadian taxpayer much, much later, or maybe never. That's what that means. And it ends up being even more expensive because you're paying interest on that debt. And we're never paying down the principal. We never get to that because we're constantly running deficits. All we're doing is paying the interest charges that are actually on these government bonds that they use and print money out of thin air in order to actually fund this stuff. So when he says this financial cost is going to be smoothed over time, oh yeah, over time, probably 100 years at this rate. So, very interesting, pointed question, but a slippery response from Mark Carney because he doesn't want to answer that directly. Yes, it's being paid for by our income taxes.
These are two-bedroom homes up here. They're about $1.2 million still. Rents have gone down 6%, but it's completely still out of whack. Do you want to see home prices fall even further, especially in the Metro Vancouver region?
What we want is to establish, and I'll speak from a federal perspective, Metro Vancouver, Lower Mainland, across British Columbia, across Canada, is to build more and make available more affordable housing that works relative to what people's incomes are. And that means supply. It means more supply, obviously. It means part of that supply coming in innovative ways. I'm turning towards Minister Robertson because we're just in the early days. Literally, the legislation has gone through the Senate moments ago of establishing Build Canada Homes, which is a factory-built. It's a way to build much more effectively, more Canadian, lower emissions, lower costs, and build out and providing that strata of more affordable housing across. So that's a supply point. But it's also about removing, as we just talked about, some of those charges so that more people can get into the homes. And I'll just underscore, you heard it, but I know you understand it, is looking out at condos, you're not pointing at that's unoccupied, but condos that have been built, that are unoccupied, that are going to sit there potentially for another couple of years. We're going to go use the right financing mechanisms, convert those into affordable housing so people can move in and use that.
So not only are they going to be buying these condo buildings, they're going to be converting them. What does that even mean, Mr. Carney? That's a key detail that you kind of left out. What does that mean to convert them into affordable housing? And as the reporter says, you're choosing to make this announcement in front of these condos that are $1.1 million. Is this what you mean by affordable housing? Also, this is the joke, because Mark Carney's saying, well, we're going to be, knocking off $40,000 per home. Well, on a $1.1 million home, knocking off $40,000, that equates to the price dropping to $1,060,000. You really think that that's going to make a dent when it comes to affordability and housing, Mr. Carney? But they don't want to talk about this, right? And even if you look at the, a condo that's going to be going for $70,000, you drop $40,000 off of that. That's $600,000 $60,000. The average Canadian cannot afford that. The average Canadian can't afford groceries. You want them to afford a $660,000 condo. That's not a plan. Especially when these municipalities continue to use these development charges as part of their slush budget. And what's going to happen here? Like, do you think the developers are going to be reducing the prices of their condos on this? Or are they going to take that delta as now pure profit? This is the big concern, because he hasn't addressed that. His concern is, well, the developers, they have all these empty condos and they're not going to take them at a loss, so we need to step in and do something. That's called business. If your product isn't selling, you better lower the price.
I'd like to hear more about converting empty condos into homes for people. Does that involve the government buying extra stock from developers and then renting those out or reselling them? Are there details you can give us on that?
You have two things. I mean, there's different models, and we'll work through the modalities and bring it out in the fall, is what I said in French. But you can do both, and my view, experts will design it, but one would look to do both. Effectively, though, what you're doing is buying them at a price, spreading out the financing, because you can do that, the financing of the underlying condo at our financing rate, but targeting at a level that is affordable.
There you go. We're going to buy them. We're going to put it on the taxpayer credit card. And we never pay the principal, folks. Last time we paid the principal was under Stephen Harper when he balanced the budget. We never pay off. So imagine you have your credit card and you have $10,000 on it, but the interest is typically around 20% these days, is $2,000 annualized. If you only pay the interest, you never pay the principal. And then, let's say you're somehow you're able to actually increase your limit to $20,000. And then you run your credit card up to $20,000. Well, now your interest charges are $4,000 annualized. And if you continue to only pay those interest charges, you're never bringing down the interest charges because you're never bringing down the principal. You're never paying it off. This is what the Liberals have been doing for the last 10 years. And Mark Carney's trying to, different modalities, blah, 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 blah. So we're announcing something we haven't figured out yet, and it's going to cost billions of dollars, and it's going to be put on the credit card, and your grandchildren are going to be paying for it for generations. But it's a great idea. This is what they want to do, and it is insanity. So no wonder it hasn't really received the reception that they planned for. Global news. Critics blast BC federal government condo bailout. Believe it or not, CBC came out and said this as well. Critics blast government plan to bail out sagging condo sector in BC. BC is facing a glut of empty condos. Thousands of Metro Vancouver units are sitting empty, and some developers are facing insolvency. Now, some housing experts are questioning a plan by the federal and provincial governments to buy some of those vacant units and turn them into affordable housing. They say it amounts to a bailout for developers who refuse to lower prices to reflect sluggish real estate market. Quote, how much of this is really a way of helping out the industry versus, I think, a bailout in terms of a bad business decision by some of these developers, end quote, asked Andy Yan, an urban planner and director of Simon Fraser University's City program. Recent data from the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC, shows that as of last month, there were 4,376 completed condos sitting empty in Metro Vancouver, a 76% increase from the year before. Yan has crunched the numbers with his analysis showing that a third of all condos without owners in Metro Vancouver cost over $1 million. He questions how deep a discount the governments can get to make those units truly affordable. BC Conservative MLA John Rustad said the government's overregulation of the housing market has added costs for developers, contributing to high prices. Quote, only governments can tax and regulate an industry into crisis and then give them a bailout. It's absolutely ludicrous, end quote, he said. This is refreshing because you have multiple mainstream media outlets now coming after this and giving it the scrutiny it finally deserves. And you also have them agreeing with Pierre Poilievre on this. So it's not just the Conservatives coming out against this now. What a refreshing change.
I want to go back to the condo discussion. I was just wondering, what solutions would you propose as an alternative to what the Prime Minister is putting forward? I know that during the campaign, you proposed cutting the sales tax on all new homes. That's something that we've seen some initial progress in Ontario with that deal that the Fed struck with the province. Would you like to see that apply on a national level, or is there anything else further you would like to do to address the kind of glut of condo sales we've seen in BC and other jurisdictions?
So first, the answer to your question is yes, I want to see all taxes taken off home building. The sales taxes, and we need to incentivize municipalities and provinces to get rid of all of their home building taxes. Secondly, we need to insist that municipalities speed up permits and free up land to get more built very quickly, and my infrastructure policy would do that. We need to cut the bureaucracy, red tape, and taxes that are responsible for our high housing costs under the Liberals here in Canada. That is a real solution. What Mark Carney and the Liberals have done is they've inflated a housing bubble with too much money printing and immigration driving up demand, and too much red tape and taxes blocking supply. Having created the housing bubble and now bursting that bubble, now they want to come and bail out the bankers and developers who profited from it. And this is another example of a tiny club of Liberal elites, billionaires, and insiders getting rich by making hardworking Canadians poor. So I'm calling for the Carney condo bailout of developers and bankers to be cancelled. As for the condos themselves, you know what the solution is for them to become affordable? The developers need to lower the sale price to a level that people can afford to pay. And when they do that, those condos will sell. And some say, well, the condos, the developers will lose money. Somebody's going to lose money. So who's it going to be? Is it going to be the waitress and the welder paying for it on their taxes so Carney can give a tax-funded bailout? Or is it going to be the developers and bankers who were trying to profit off of the bubble in the first place?
You know how you make those units sell and make them affordable? You lower the price. Oh, you don't want to lose money? Well, you made a poor business decision in the first place. You didn't have any problem selling other units to other buyers, because otherwise the building wouldn't have gotten built in the first place now, would it? These same developers, many of them, in COVID, refunded a whole bunch of deposits that people made in order to be able to jack up the cost of these units, because they saw that the housing prices were going through the roof and they wanted to profit off of that. Now you want to bail out because none of these will sell? Are you kidding? That's called business. And you can't be operating a business with the understanding, well, if I make poor business decisions, then the government and the taxpayer is already going to bail me out. No, it's not how this works. And it's definitely not how this works. And the CMHC, Carney's own agency, says this isn't how it works and says that what he's trying to do isn't going to work. This is from a report the CMHC put out in early June of this year. Reducing or even eliminating development charges wouldn't solve the housing crisis facing Canada. While it may incent greater supply, the increase is not enough to reach pre-pandemic affordability levels in many cities. Additionally, development charges have grown to play a significant role in municipal finances. Eliminating them will create a gap that municipalities will need to address. The government is going into this operating under the assumption that the financial management of these municipalities over their budgets is flawless. And that is absolutely not the case. Because just as the Liberal government is not managing their finances properly, many municipalities are not managing their finances properly. Hamilton included. Don't even get me started on the way our mayor has managed their finances, encouraging to solve the homeless problem by Hamiltonians to actually bring the homeless into their homes, while she takes a trip to go to Italy in the spirit of visiting our sister city, all on the taxpayer dime. So let's not pretend that municipalities are completely perfect when managing their finances. In many cases, they're just as bad, if not worse, than the Liberals. The CMHC is saying right here, if all you're doing is going after development charges, it's not gonna do what you need. And plus, Carney said it was temporary. And plus, he's not actually removing them, he's just funding them. So he's not getting rid of the problem at all. He's not even going so far as to say what the CMHC is saying. Well, if you eliminate the development charges, it'll, drop down to a certain percentage, but that's going to create a gap that the municipalities need to make up. Apparently, they don't need to do that because Mark Carney has no intention of them actually dropping the development charges. We're just paying for it out of the taxpayer purse. Mark Carney has made a huge mistake in this because he's not getting support from the Conservatives, obviously. He's not getting support from his own housing ministry, and he's not getting support from the mainstream media because they're coming after him just as hard as the Conservatives are. Are we in the twilight zone, Canada? Or are we starting to see a consistent shift in the way the mainstream media is covering Mark Carney?